Welcome everyone to the 9 Principles of Spiritual Recovery channel. I'm Ken Sanborn. Thank you for visiting. This video will provide a brief description of the Stressors behavior cycle and its 9 phases. This model is something I've been working on since I began my clinical practice in substance abuse counseling back in 2010. Kind of an on and off deal. It's a variation on my cognitive behavioral therapy training, which is what I was trained in. So CBT, basically the premise is that your thoughts generate feelings and those feelings generate behaviors, and that there's a pretty short line between the three, and if you change your thoughts, you change your life. Add a little rational emotive behavioral therapy in there as well. The premise is that your thoughts lead to feelings, which lead to behaviors, similar to CBT. And the primary therapies are thought replacement or thought pattern replacement. Whenever you think of something that is negative or not true or distorted, you try to replace that with a thought that's valid, true, and real. Same thing with feelings replacement. Things like anger, anxiety, depression. You try to replace those with something that's more productive and positive. And so you might say with REBT, it's change your thoughts and feelings, change your life. The next school of thought that I take from in my model is social cognitive theory or social learning theory. And the central tenets are modeling of behaviors that we learn socially by watching other folks, observing other folks. We have outcome expectancies, what we think is going to happen. That could be based on real and valid thoughts and feelings and beliefs. If they're not, then they're going to generate reinforcements, or basically are going to reinforce the stressors that a person would be experiencing. Again, self-efficacy is about self-confidence, but on a situational basis, kind of the day-to-day problems. Once we figure we can handle those kinds of things, it builds our self-confidence, which is protective in keeping us from self-abuse, and also generates good feelings and tends to make us happier people. Another part of this model is that we identify with behavior models. So generally, at some point, our identity takes on those folks that we model our behaviors after. So in essence, you might say, get new role models, learn to behave differently, change your life. So I want to go back to this Ruby rule. We apparently, under the social learning theory, says that we learn by watching other people's behaviors. Ruby rule is a little different. The golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. The silver rule kind of turns that around a little bit. The Ruby rule I've come up with, and I haven't really seen it, I don't believe, anywhere else in this kind of form, but it's basically treat yourself the way you want others to treat you. So if you want to be respected, respect yourself. You want to be cared about by others, care about yourself. People will watch the way you treat yourself, and they will treat you accordingly. And the next theory that I pull from is choice theory by William Glasser, psychiatrist. He developed reality therapy back in the 60s, control theory a little later than that, and then I think in the 90s it became called choice theory. His ideas are that we act to fill particular needs for survival, love, belonging, power, and fun. And I would agree with the fun. I think that's what we're programmed for, is pleasure seeking. And in my addiction counseling, I used to actually kind of explain to folks that the fact that they're addicted to something shows that their brain's doing what it's supposed to do, which is to seek pleasure so that we continue to perpetuate the species, Mother Nature. Back to Glasser, he says that we act, think, feel, and experience body sensations. Those all combine into what are called total behaviors, which are choices we make about how to behave to meet those needs. He also says that mental illness stems from unhappiness that comes from problem relationships. And so he might say, choose to be happy, change your life. So I've taken from kind of everywhere these things that I've studied, and I put these three things together. The 9 principles of spiritual recovery, which is something that was given to me in an inspiration. The Stressors, the behavior cycle, which I took all these other things and kind of combined them. Probably the biggest difference between what I work with and what these other ones kind of work with, I put feelings and body sensations ahead of thoughts. And there are different schools of thought that do that. My model is basically CBT with that difference. And also 6 dimensions of wellness. We talk about physical, emotional, mental, intellectual, social, occupational, and spiritual health dimensions. We can use that as a framework to plan for growth and change. Now, during my substance abuse counseling career, I probably saw over 1,000 different people and started to notice some patterns that seemed to emerge, and didn't really matter what the substance of choice was or any of those sorts of things. Even the stressors, in pretty similar. Traumas made a significant difference. Those were a whole different kind of experience for folks. But like I said, I noticed over the years that some patterns emerged. So basically, I found that people experience life stressors, and the folks that I was seeing just had maladaptive coping skills, which is part of the definition of addiction. Maladaptive just means that they don't work. They're a bad idea. Also, I found that stressors produce emotional responses and body discomfort. We've all experienced that. And I found that the folks I worked with had emotional regulation issues. They couldn't keep negative emotions kind of in check. They tended to get out of control and then started to kind of dictate how people thought and behaved, which is this next part. Emotions and body sensations influence thoughts and thought patterns. And what I found was that most of the folks that I was working with had unhealthy thinking and thought patterns. They used defense mechanisms all the time, things like projection, transference, sarcasm. Um, they would catastrophize, make more out of things than there was really there. So that sort of thing. So the next thing I kind of noticed was that these thoughts and thought patterns inform what people want to see happen in a particular situation, what their desires are. And I found that a lot of folks ended up with unrealistic expectations, uh, or basically even dishonest expectations. And those desires, or what they wanted in the situation, was generally unrealistic. Um, what they thought was going to happen, what they wanted to have happen. They didn't have the resources or the capacity to do it. And those desires and expectations then get tested through expression to other people. We talk to other folks about what we're going through and what we want to see happen. And we react to how other people respond. If we talk to somebody and they say, hey, that sounds great, then we may give that a little bit of weight and let that influence us. And so sometimes if we have kind of delusional thinking and our desires and expectations are unrealistic or even dishonest, that we express that to other folks, if they don't set us straight, then we'll probably continue to move through our cycle and end up behaving based on those things. These attitudes that we express to other people shape our beliefs, and again, includes the reactions of other people. And a lot of times, this birds of a feather thing, if you're hanging around with folks who aren't thinking all that clearly too, or either, then you could end up with some inauthentic, misguided beliefs about what you're going through and what you think can happen. Beliefs are foundations of our values. So beliefs are what we think is real and true. Values are a little bit firmer, a little stronger. And so these beliefs that aren't quite real end up producing incongruent values and morals. Or these are values that really don't line up with what the person truly believes is the right way to live and how to behave and how to get along with other people. In general, values direct one's will or intention. What we truly believe about life will tend to influence what we intend to do in life. And I found a lot of folks that I worked with lacked will. They just didn't have any intention. They didn't have the ability to thoughtfully plan their behaviors. And they didn't have the power or the capability to put a plan in place if they developed one. And a lot of times I saw values violations. These folks would behave toward family, toward friends, toward people in the community, toward themselves in ways that completely violated who they were as people or what they believed. The situations had gotten so out of control that they just would do things that were inconsistent with their true character. It's very sad to watch that. And then will or intention becomes the basis for thoughtful planning of behaviors for most folks. The people I worked with generally had problematic behaviors, actions that were not healthy, weren't productive. And in general, behaviors reinforce or resolve stressors. So if we behave in a way that is healthy and productive, constructive, we'll resolve those stressors and we won't have to experience them again. Or if we do experience them again, they'll impact on us to a lesser degree, and we'll also know how to resolve them a lot quicker. We'll have a strategy that we've used through experience. We can go to that and take care of business. Again, if we have unhealthy behaviors, those will reinforce stressors. We'll go back through it again. If we haven't learned how to cope with it, how to resolve the issue, then that just reinforces that stressor. And we'll see it again, and we'll go through the whole cycle all over until we figure out how to actually resolve it. And sometimes we're going to need help from other people. Other times we can figure it out on our own. Most folks, give us 2 or 3 times through, and we can usually figure it out. The next video that we'll be doing will be part 5 of the Stressors to Behaviors Cycle series, and we'll work with phases 4, 5, and 6, desires, attitudes, and beliefs, respectively. And the series will end with a discussion of phases 7, 8, and 9, which we just mentioned, values, will, and behaviors. So there's a little levity for you. Although it's not really that funny though for people like me who have a history of using food to cope with stress. The evidence is on my glucose meter and around my waist. So this is a stressors to behaviors cycle, a graphic representation. There are 9 phases in the cycle, and we'll talk about desires and will in a little bit more detail when we get to them. So at the maroon triangle that's at the top between behaviors and stressors, that's the beginning point in the cycle. If you want to start anywhere, that would be the place to start generally. Right there. Now, between phases are intervention points. And these are places where we can stop, assess our spiritual recovery plan for addressing a stressor in order to make changes or adjustments before continuing on with the cycle. And the practical usefulness of this model is that by understanding how the cycle applies to the way we behave to cope with a stressor, we can use it for intentional planning. Essentially, we can plan to address a current stressor so that the issue is resolved, and again, we can prevent that stressor from being a future problem. The phases of the S2B cycle are as shown on this slide. 9 again. Stressors, feelings, thoughts, desires, attitudes, beliefs, values, will, and behaviors. And so these stressors, again, we've talked about these before. Problems, pressures, demands, threats, traumas. Feelings would be emotions and body responses to stressors. Thoughts, again, ideas and patterns of thinking. Desires, what we want or what we wish for, usually in a situation that's stressful. Attitudes, it's how we express our feelings, thoughts, and desires to other people. Beliefs, again, ideas, thoughts about what's real and true. Values, just beliefs, but they're very strongly held. And these are beliefs about life and how to live it. Another way of looking at it are morals or our philosophy. Will is our intentional planning, thoughtfulness, and then the power to be able to do a plan, put it into action. Behaviors, that's it right there, actions or deeds. Now, I talked about this before. Conceptual self-talk, we'll go back to desires. This is basically we talk to ourselves about what we conceive that we want to have happen in the situation, what we wish for. And on the opposite side of that cycle, kind of on the other end of it, when we talk about will, this is self-talk again, but it's intentional self-talk, thoughtful self-talk about what we will do to make a situation better, to address a stressor, to resolve it, to positively affect our desired outcomes. So this video focuses on 3 phases. The first 3, stressors, feelings, and thoughts. So to review our prior videos just a little bit, we talked about stressors. And again, a problem would be a situation or question without an answer or a solution. If you think math problems, that's a problem. Pressures, kind of being pushed to do something that we don't want to do or we can't do and can't see a way to do it. Demand, think about somebody pulling something from us that we can or don't want to give. And a threat would be a perceived situation in which something of value may be taken away from us by another person outside of us. And the 5th type of stressor we talked about were traumas, situations in which people have experienced some sort of loss or distress, and they respond to these life events that they perceived as threatening, probably were threatening, that resulted in limiting or debilitating thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And the person may actually experience subsequent changes in the view of him or herself, tend to see their own identity and self-image kind of unhealthy ways that can cause damage to their self-efficacy, self-confidence, self-esteem, and lead to self-abusive and self-destructive behaviors. So the first of these phases we're going to talk about are stressors. And again, these are the types we tend to deal with. Now, this chart can help us organize information related to each phase. It's very quick and easy. For stressors, we see the kind of general description and the relation to the next phase, which is feelings. So the general description: perceived outside threats, problem, pressures, or demands on a person that elicit or influence a person's feelings. And a specific example would be like household expenses, bills that are coming from outside. Something that I've found over the last year or so that was a stressor for me would be limited mobility, my leg swelling, that kind of thing. Physical health problems. And there's a blank form that you can use, record it anywhere you want, take a picture of it, do what you want. Second phase is feelings. We talked about what those are. Again, body sensations, emotions, things like anger, anxiety, depression, fear in general. In the same form, again, general description, emotions or body sensations that lead to thought and idea formulation. In a specific example, frustration, vulnerability, dependence, those sorts of things. And a blank that you can use. So the third phase is thoughts, so ideas and patterns of thinking. So some of these thought patterns that we come up with are negative thought patterns, just kind of groups of thoughts that we tend to put together in response to a stressor and the kind of uncomfortable feelings and body sensations that those produce. Generally, we have go-tos. When we experience a stressor kind of repeatedly, we'll have the same groups of thoughts that'll come to us as a result. Distorted thinking, self-explanatory. Addictive thinking, this kind of compulsive thinking goes along with stinking thinking. I put personality up there with addictive thinking. Some folks would say that there's an addictive personality. I never really saw evidence of that, and I've talked to a lot of folks over the years. I think we're all pretty much wired to seek pleasure. Like I said before, Mother Nature has us programmed so that we have fun, and we'll take an interest and perpetuate the species. And so basically, addiction to me, like I said before, is proof that your brain's actually doing what it's supposed to do. Again, though, when your coping mechanism causes more problems than it resolves, or your pleasure produces more pain than pleasure, then you got to check it out. Try something different. These defense mechanisms, these are kind of groups of thoughts as well that folks employ. Some of the old standbys would be things like sarcasm, transference, My personal favorite, projection, especially when I'm on the receiving end of that one. Minimization, catastrophizing, justification, rationalization, those sorts of things. All kind of immature responses to uncomfortable feelings. Sarcasm we can throw in there. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. But some other kind of mature responses would actually be kind of a positive use of humor, not putting people down, but just trying to, kind of get people to laugh and have fun with something. Other mature thought patterns would be things like conflict resolution, assertive communications, basically being respectful and honest with people and telling them what you need from them. So again, here's the form that we were using. Thoughts being these ideas or patterns of ideas a person has about a stressor that lead to conceptual self-talk or desire formation. Some of the thoughts that I've had probably in the last year or so, things were like, I can't get around and take care of my needs, I'm stuck, that kind of thing. And a blank form that you can use. So to kind of review what we talked about in this video, we talked about the stressors to behavior cycle, and we answered the question, what is it? Where'd it come from? We talked about stressors and the definition for those and the different types when using 5 different types. We talked about feelings, have a description for them, basically being emotions and body sensations, and we gave some examples of those. And the third phase in the stressors to behavior cycle of thoughts, and we gave a description of those, general and specific, and examples. So I just want to thank you all for watching this video through, and the next video will be about the phases 4, 5, and 6 of the stressors to behavior cycle. Desires, attitudes, and beliefs. If you found anything in this video that you like or was interesting or educational, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, signing up for notifications, maybe sharing this video with somebody who's like-minded, and feel free as always to leave something in the comments, and again, just try to play nice. And thanks again, everyone. Till next time, take care.